Okay, so I'm going to talk today about Zen-16. This is a quick overview of the Zen-16, what it's capable of, and hopefully by the end of this webinar you'll know pretty much what the features of the Zen-16 are and what sort of applications you can put it in, and hopefully that'll answer most of your questions. So hopefully you can see on the screen the first slide, and we'll just make a start. So what you learned today, an overview of the Zen-16, brief explanation of its features and capabilities. I want to look at some of the Zen-16 options and variations, talk about the Zen-16 plugins, and a glimpse of what's coming up in the future. And I'm just going to touch on the software tools that we use for the Zen-16, but I'm not going to go into that in any great detail today. The key features of the Zen-16, 16 fully isolated input channels. It has 2 isolated 4 to 20 milliamp outputs, 2 onboard relays. It has 4 isolated digital status inputs. It has internal data logging included in the Zen-16. And there are 2 serial ports plus a dedicated programming port. Ethernet options are available, and it comes with 4 different power supply options. There are also an expansion port on there, and you can order an external digital input and output device as well, which will expand the digital I/O on the Zen-16. And it's very simple to configure through the software tools that we have. Additional features, there are 10 totalizers in the Zen-16 which can be used for flow applications, totalizing flow or anything really. It has 16 advanced set points. Each set point has hysteresis, make and break delays, alarm and control modes, in and out of band modes, startup inhibits, and a few more features. There are plugins available for the Zen-16 which greatly expand the functionality of the Zen-16, and by loading different plugins you can make it specific to different applications. We'll talk about plugins more a little bit later. And all of the inputs and outputs have user-definable labels and units so that they appear in logical names and units. Why use the Zen-16? One of the biggest things is that all the inputs are fully isolated. The Zen-16 also has been designed and tested to operate in electrically harsh industrial environments, so it's very good in electrically noisy sort of applications. We have very simple configuration tools with help on every page. Cost effective for multi-channel applications. So you've got 16 channels here of analog, high resolution analog inputs all in the one package. And we offer great support for all our customers. The Zen-16 is in a DIN rail mountable case, but it can be screwed directly onto a flat surface if you don't have a DIN rail. This is the label of the Zen-16 showing all the inputs and output connections. First, I want to talk about the power supply options. So the power supply is a 2-pin connector. We have a high voltage power supply option, 85 to 265 AC or 95 to 370 volts DC. We have a medium voltage option, which is 24 to 48 volts AC or 17 to 72 volts DC. And we have a low volt option, which is just 10 to 30 volts DC. Soon we also have a low power battery option, which offers a shutdown, a low power shutdown mode. This is designed mainly for remote battery operation, and it'll be available soon. The Zen-16 also has a couple of indicators on it to show you what's happening with serial port activity, relay status, and digital input status. and a beat light to tell you that the device is functioning correctly. 16 analog inputs. Each input is user configurable for thermocouple, RTD, 4 to 20 milliamp current, voltage and frequency counters, and a potentiometer mode. And remember that each input is individually isolated from everything else, so it's fully isolated. We have 2 analog output channels with 4 to 20 milliamp outputs. Again, isolated from the inputs. 2 relay outputs, 2 normally open contacts, as you can see there. We have 4 digital status inputs. These are optically isolated as well, and they can be used either as simple on-off status inputs, or they can also be set up in counter or frequency modes. They have a limit of about 10 kilohertz count and frequency range. Serial port 1. Serial port 1 has a dual function. It can be RS485 or RS422 port. Can operate in Modbus RTU slave. The Zen-16 also has a Modbus RTU master mode. There are other defined instruments, ASCII modes, and with plugins, etc., we can offer a variety of custom serial or print modes as well. Serial port 1 also comes with a separate option for an Ethernet port. Ethernet options can include ASCII mode Ethernets, Modbus TCP, and we'll soon be releasing an Ethernet IP version as well. Rachel's just asked a question, which I'll get back to in the question and answers at the end, Rachel. Serial port 2. Serial port 2 is separate from 1, and it has either RS485 or RS232 options. It will internally sense when an RS232 connection is there, and it'll switch automatically to RS232 mode. So you can have one or the other, obviously, with that port at a time. Again, the same serial protocols are available on serial port 2. The Zen-16 also has an I/O expansion port. As I said, this allows you to connect the Zen-16 to a Zen Rio, which is one of our daughter modules that goes with the Zen-16. The Zen Rio has 16 relay outputs, each with a double throw, single pole changeover sort of contact. And it also has 16 extra digital status inputs. And we can actually cascade 2 Zen Rios together, which would give you a total of 32 extra relay outputs and 32 extra digital status inputs. The Zen-16 also has a display port. This is a dedicated display. It can drive either a 16 by 2 line LCD front mount display or a 6 by 2 line red LED display. Each display includes user buttons and function buttons, and again, when these displays are combined with plugins, they can offer a limited configuration options and so on for customers. This display is designed to be used only in a short distance, maybe up to a meter or so. It's really intended for applications where the display is mounted in the same enclosure as the Zen-16, where a few critical parameters need to be displayed on the outside of the enclosure. So it's not intended for display a long distance away. It's designed for close proximity. Data logging. The Zen includes data logging capabilities. With the standard built-in data logging memory, there are over 30,000 samples available of data logging. Each sample has trigger and timestamp information, and each sample can contain up to 30 individual parameter values. So, for example, one sample might contain the 16 16 input values for the 16 input channels, and maybe you have 10 totalizers running in the background as well. So you would have a total of 26 different parameters in each sample, and then you'd have over 30,000 samples in the data logging memory. And it has modes that allow cyclic logging, so the memory just wraps around and you get the oldest 30,000 cycles. We also have an SD logging option for the Zen-16. Similar functions, similar sample number of parameters per sample, but obviously with a small micro SD card inserted into the Zen-16, the number of samples is greatly increased. So for those applications where you need to log for long periods of time, we have that option. The programming port on the Zen-16 allows our WorkBench application to connect directly to the Zen-16. The advantage of this is you can configure Zen-16s either offline before you ship, or you can configure them when they're actually in the application without needing to affect or disrupt your other two serial ports, which are probably working in your application. Through the programming port, the WorkBench allows you to have a complete configuration of the Zen-16 and also to do data viewing and graphing and so on. The programming port is connected to your PC via a USB adapter, which is provided by Define Instruments. Zen-16 plugins. The plugin can be loaded via the WorkBench application. Some of the plugins we have are specific to things like modems, Wi-Fi, remote I/O plugins. So these are really application specific. We have a library of plugins, then we are adding to them as we go. And obviously, if we have requests for specific applications, we can always look at creating new plugins. A typical application that we might have is one shown here, where the Zen-16 is actually talking through some of our Zigbee twin links wirelessly to different sensors. It's measuring temperatures and a few things directly, and then it's driving a modem, which is connected to the mobile network and obviously to the cloud, and can be used for updating and so on. So there is a plugin that will let you do this, and once the WorkBench plugin is loaded, then the configuration for that plugin can be done through WorkBench as well. You'll need to just check with Define Instruments for the plugins that are available, and as I say, we're adding to them. Here's a very brief look at the tools that we have available. WorkBench was designed to make configuration as easy as possible. You'll see that every page in WorkBench has help information down the right-hand column. So whatever mode you click, there's help information on hand immediately. All the configuration parameters are easy to understand, and it's a very user-friendly interface, simple to use. It allows for cloning of Zen-16s, configuration online or offline. You can print out configuration certificate and much more. What's coming up? As I mentioned, soon to be released features Ethernet IP. That will be released probably in a few months' time. We have a built-in Wi-Fi with plugin support for cloud updates, email, FTP, remote configuration, and access point mode. That should be, again, coming out soon. It'll allow the Zen-16 to wirelessly connect to your existing network or to create its own ad hoc network, and which will let you connect several Zen-16s together, or else let you connect into the Zen-16 directly through your PC or to configure the device without going through the programming port. We also hope to develop a plugin for the Telit modem, which will allow you to use the GSM, the mobile network, to do cloud updates, FTP to sites, or email update log information, and so on. And again, that should be coming soon. We also will be releasing the Zen-X in the future, which will give you the option of additional isolated 4 to 20 milliamp outputs or additional onboard relays. So the Zen-X will be a different configuration. It may be that we sell 8 input modules, 8 isolated input modules with an extra 4 analog outputs, giving you a total of 6 analog output, and then an additional 4 relay modules, giving you a total of 6 relays, all built in to the Zen case. So there'll be several different ordering options that we'll give you, and that should be coming up in the near future as well. Okay, questions and answers. Rachel had a question. Any idea when the low power Zen will be available? I think the low power Zen will be available in a few months. We've got prototypes now, and it should be available very soon. Are there any more questions? Okay, thank you, everybody. And that ends the first Zen-16 webinar. Thanks for attending.